Spire Global, ticker symbol SPIR, is releasing earnings tomorrow, May 13th. And this video is going to be a quick kind of prediction, half recap on Spire Global, the company, and also where I think the stock price is headed. So the first thing I want to point out is that Spire Global has, year to date, gone up already more than 125%. And at its peak, it's gone up maybe like 180% year to date, right? It started the year at 781. So this is only year to date. This isn't even 1 year, right? This is year to date. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a pullback. But having said that, I also want to point out that people are starting to invest in space because of the SpaceX IPO, right? People investing in Rocket Lab, people investing in ASTS before the crappy earnings report for ASTS. Space is top, it's front and center in everyone's mind, along with semiconductors, along with the AI play. It's sector sentiment and how people are valuing this sector, specifically space, and people are more bullish on the space sector right now. Even though we've run up 100 and some percent, whether it goes up or down really depends on execution. As you saw, Rocket Lab rocketed up 50% after earnings. So my covered calls are kind of screwed, but I'll deal with that later. And then ASTS, right? They had crap earnings, and their stock dropped some like 15% or like 10%. So I guess what I'm saying is that you do expect some type of momentum going after the earnings call. Now let's talk about just the company and the business itself. I think that I've said this in multiple videos now, but Spire Global is doing business in a geopolitical time of the world that is offering so many tailwinds for Spire Global's business that it blows my mind. So Spire Global specifically the defense and kind of a global security segment of Spire Global. So Trump recently said that he would pull out 5,000 troops and maybe even more from Germany. And this is basically based off of the recent Iran war, and Trump not liking how Germany responded to that war and how Germany kind of they were against the invasion. Now, this could be bearish for a lot of companies, right? Because you see more geopolitical unrest, you see more instability and you see people not trusting the US as much. But for Spire Global specifically, this is very bullish, because if people are no longer, i.e. countries like Germany, France, the UK, other European NATO members, they no longer trust the US as much. That means they're going to beef up their own security. That means that they're going to spend their own money to increase their own defense budget, their own defense spending. And what do we see happened? Just, I think last week, Spire Global finished establishing their German satellite site. I can't see how, in my opinion, I think that Germany might, there is a potential that Germany might have even sped up this construction of this manufacturing facility in Munich in order to help deal with the increased lack of trust in US defense and US support for NATO members, right? You also see the not conflict, but like the controversial things that Trump says with regards to Greenland, right? Trying to take over Greenland, trying to take over Cuba, trying to take over Venezuela. You see all these things, and there's so many examples of this, right? You see France increasing military spend, right? You saw that, I think it was the I'm not sure if it was the Prime Minister of the UK, but I think the UK member, some high official in the UK said that they were going to go to Iran and try to figure out the Strait of Hormuz themselves, or like with other NATO members, because the oil problem affects NATO members, affects everyone other than the US more than it affects the US. I'm sure there's some companies some countries that it doesn't affect as much of the US, but just talking about Western allies or Western countries, right? The US is more or less isolated from this risk. They are affected by it, but not as much as these European NATO members. So that's just talking about how many tailwinds there are for this, right? You also have, this is just the European side, or like the global side. Going back to home, going back to the US, you see we are also increasing our defense budget, right? I think in a recent bill, I think, did Trump say he was going to increase defense spending by however trillion or however much? A lot of money, right? I just forgot the number, but it was a lot of money. You see the Golden Dome. You also saw that Spire Global hired a bunch of people that were deep inside the U.S. Army or U.S. Armed Forces into the board of directors. You see America increasing defense spending. You see all of our NATO allies increasing defense spending. This is just increasing the TAM that Spire Global has access to. The other thing I want to talk about is this private placement, right? The $70 million private placement that Spire Global sold, I think, 5 million shares at $14. Before, in a previous video, I talked about how the wording actually changed for Spire Global. In their Q3 earnings, they said that they would probably hit cash flow, they'd be cash flow positive by end of 2026. And then after Q4 earnings, they said they would hit cash flow positive either end of 2026 or Q1 of 2027, which basically means that they were unsure of whether or not they'd be cash flow positive by 2026, and they were giving themselves that they added that buffer of 2027, which I thought was actually slightly bearish. But with this $70 million private placement, I think that this is probably going to be just enough to push it so that it, now I don't want to say guarantees, but makes it much more plausible that they will hit cash flow positive by 2026 Q4. Why is that? Because first of all, when you're not even just first of all, right? The main reason, when you have $70 million of cash on hand, right? That's an extra, what, $3 million of just interest that you're earning on your cash on hand. And I think that's really important, especially, it's kind of tangent, but one of the reasons why I'm not investing in data centers, like in Nebius, Iran, right, in CoreWeave, they have too much debt. And in an environment where we might see interest rate hikes, I don't want to deal with that, because I didn't tell any, or I never told anyone, but like a while back, right, because I saw AI and I thought, oh, people need 8 data centers to train, right? I invested in a data center called Xterra, and they went bankrupt because they ran out of money, because data centers are expensive, right? And I don't want to deal with that risk. I don't want to deal with too much debt, which Spire Global did have a lot of debt, right? But then I'm just glad that they survived, because high interest rates are going to destroy so many companies, just because they either grew too fast, they don't have enough cash on hand, and when you increase the interest rates, you're increasing the odds that that company is going to go bankrupt. But with this, right now, you actually have more money, right? You're getting more money because you have more cash on hand, and that allows you to also grow faster and also grow with a bigger margin of safety. So that's why I think that this is actually a really good move. Even you could say it diluted us, right, by $14 a share. But honestly, I'm kind of glad they did it, because you just have more money, and then the business can embark in ventures that they can work on tasks and work on projects that without having to worry too much about the balance sheet. And so that's kind of where my headspace is right now, right? I'm saying there's a lot of tailwinds, and also you do see this extra little boost in that provides a safety cushion in this high interest rate environment. And I think that this will actually also help make them more secure and make more people value Spire Global more, just for a safety type of play over its competitors that are also going to be smaller companies that might have more debt. What's up, Future Jason here? There's another really positive tailwind that I completely forgot to mention, and that is the companies that are doing AI are starting to shift to inference, right? The reason why we need more CPUs is because those people realize that we need to do more inference, right? That's the same thing with what's it called? I think it was Cerberus or Cerebus, that company, right? It's about inference. And what do you need for inference? You need data for inference. You can't infer based off of past data. You need modern data to infer, because yeah, you can train your model on past data and backtest, right? People in investing know what backtesting is, but you can't use prehistoric data. You can't use old data if you want to predict the future. You need to have the current economic environment. You need the current figures and the current everything, and that's the same. And the same thing, you need the same exact stuff when it comes to guessing certain, like what might happen, what a certain country might do, right? And that's why you need the defense data, or you need current economic or current weather trends, or current agricultural trends, or current agricultural data and weather data in order to predict next week, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, right? Half a year later. You need all this data, and Spire Global is a data as a service platform. The cool thing about Spire Global is they're space as a service, so they have high margins, high recurring ARR or annual ARR, but they have a moat as well, right? It's not something that Claude can replace. Claude can't create satellites for you, but it can create software for you. That I've made this point a few times already, but data is, as I said before, chips, right? Data centers, those are the picks and shovels. But data is investing in the land that people dig for gold, right? You're investing in the land that people might find gold in. That's what investing in data is. And it's high margin, and it's necessary for AI, right? You can't predict tomorrow based off of yesterday's data, because you don't know what today's circumstances, you don't know what today's environment is. That's why Spire Global's data is going to be, in my opinion, I think it's going to be so valuable for AI, because you need it. That's why NVIDIA partnered with Spire Global. They traded GPUs for Spire Global's weather data, right? So anyways, back to the video. Now, one thing I wanted to touch upon is this, right? Spire Global awarded 2.5 million NOAA contract for satellite weather data, and this was awarded last year in September, I think. Or is it September 4th, right? So this is a 9-month contract, and this is one of those, if you listen to the past what's called earnings call, you heard management talk a lot about how they're in a lot of pilot programs, a lot of testing phase programs, right? Which are basically just kind of like either be smaller contracts, or not even contracts, sometimes just testing phases and kind of just like testing periods, that Spire Global has to kind of showcase that their product is best in class. Their product is state of the art. And this 9-month kind of testing period or pilot program is about to end in June. So that's a month from now. So in, I think like, was it June 10th-ish? So by June 10th, which is already less than a month away, we'll get to hear whether or not they can continue, whether or not they win this contract, whether or not they win this, or this pilot program proves successful, and Spire Global gets to continue an even longer contract period with the NOAA. So this is definitely something you want to look out for. This has nothing to do with the earnings call, but this is something I want to put on everyone's radar. So I guess TLDR or TLDW, you have currently the space sector sentiment is really high, right? So that's really bullish on the stock price, because more and more people are seeing the SpaceX IPO and looking for other space sector stocks to invest in. You see Rocket Lab, ASTS, right? Spire Global, which is probably one of the things I attribute the 120% run up, and even more than that, almost like 200% run up to $23. Additionally, so many tailwinds that are propelling Spire Global and their business, right? Geopolitical conflicts that are and war. Those things are bullish, which it's sad, it's scary, it's bad to say, I guess, but it's bullish for Spire Global's TAM, bullish for Spire Global's business, right? Because they just have more customers. And so one thing I also want to note, right? People could say, oh, what if Trump doesn't win the midterms and the Democrats come in and the Democrats win presidency in 2028? Well, does that just destroy Spire Global's TAM? No, it doesn't, because once bitten, twice shy, right? So European countries are still going to spend more money on their military, but also, what are the other things that Spire Global's? What are other Spire Global products? Weather data, weather data. You don't think like monitoring soil moisture and like agriculture? That's like caring about farmers and things like that. You don't think that's a very democratic thing to say, right? So Spire Global kind of wins regardless of which party is in power. The cash on hand that Spire Global has also leads me to believe that Spire Global is in a position to grow quicker without having to worry too much about money concerns and bankruptcy concerns, even in an interest rate hike, which interest rate hike just means that Spire Global is going to have more interest that's coming in from their cash on hand, from their cash in the bank. So that's just kind of where my headspace is at going into Spire Global's earnings. I'm very bullish on the company, but again, you do have to account for the fact that we did just run up more than 200%, and we're on a slight pullback now, but we did go up more like 100%, 125% now, and there is room for a pullback, right? Even though we did just pull back from 23, but I mean, if you're here since $7, $6, hey man, life's not that bad, right? But other than that, I'm still really bullish on Spire Global. Ticker symbol SPIR. Have a good day. Peace.